Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala, amma ba'd. The sessions that we're having currently on Wednesday nights here at Inner Compass, these sessions are on what we've titled Parenting with Presence. And we've been going through an article in which the author, a mother, she wrote quite some time back this article, and in it she's basically going through 10 tips that she was able to gather over the period of many years while interviewing Muslim parents that she found had children who seemed to be doing well, both when it came to their lives, their careers, but also they seemed to be doing well in religion. So they were able to balance between both. So the author of this article that we're going through, she interviewed she would interview these parents and ask them for tips and advice as to what was the secret. What was it that helped these parents raise their children in a way that ultimately then their children turned out the way that they did. And so we've been through 5 of the tips. We're on tip number 6. Tip number 6, she writes, is that the parents shared that I wasn't afraid to be the bad guy, but I never behaved badly. So really, the core principle here is what? These parents that she interviewed, they were very comfortable leading, and they understood that their role was not to please the child. That it was necessary for these parents to implement strong, loving boundaries. I think those 2 words are very key. There have to be strong boundaries, but it has to be done with love. That balance there is critical. If you only have one, it might lose its impact and its effect. And the reason is that children naturally desire structure. They desire to understand what the right way to navigate the world is, or what is a healthy way to navigate the world. The world is a confusing place for them. Everything is so limitless and full of potential. Your options are unlimited. What do you want to do as a young child? Who do you want to take as your friend? There's just so many options. Parents are the ones that are meant to step in and draw boundaries to say, this is healthy, this is unhealthy. This will be good for you, this won't be good for you. And the parent will especially run into resistance when the boundary that the parent sets goes against the nafs, right? The deep desires that the child has. And so the author, Hina Khan Mukhtar, writes that, the general philosophy that these parents function by was that my job is not to make my children happy in every moment. My job is to guide them towards goodness, health, and Jannah. And there's a very big difference in the 2. These parents, she writes, saw themselves first as parents and second as friends. They saw themselves in their relation, in their role with their children. In relation to their children, they saw themselves first as parents and then as friends, and not vice versa. And here we get into different parenting approaches. So, for example, you have what's called permissive parenting. This is essentially where the parent attempts to be a friend to the child, like a pure, almost equal. So the parent refuses to set boundaries or tries to avoid ever setting boundaries. they kind of permit, they allow, they're permissive, they allow. And this is very harmful for the child. I mean, the research shows this is not a healthy dynamic for that child. The child grows up without direction, without guidance, and they will make a lot of mistakes. They will go down paths that they will regret later on. And the parent can save them. Can, but chooses not to. One of the reasons parents sometimes resort to permissive parenting is they fear the child's disapproval. The child will look at them and make a face and say, "You don't love me, mom or dad." Or "You're so mean." Or "So-and-so's parent is nice because they let their child do this and you're not letting me do it." And so permissive parenting is one approach, but it's not a healthy approach. You have an opposite approach, which is known as authoritarian. Authoritarian parenting is when the parent is a tyrant, rules with excessive fear, essentially controlling the child. And one of the ways that this is characterized is by statements like, "Because I said so." Because I said so. No explanation, no guidance as to why the parent is trying to explain to them or holding them back from something. Just because I said so. And again, what this ends up doing, or the impact it has on the child, is that the child lives in fear. And they feel very controlled. They don't feel connected to their parent. Then when they're younger, they might acquiesce and concede, control. But when they get older and they start to hit 16, 17, 18, and they start really aggressively demanding their autonomy, there's often a lot of conflict between the parent and the child. Right? Because the child now is tired of this tyranny. They want autonomy. I should be able to go out at nighttime with my friends. I'm an adult now. I'm 18. And the parent is used to what? Not having to ever explain himself or herself. The parent just says, "No, because I said so." And up until now, the child has just accepted. But for the first time, the child's like, "I don't care if you said so. You can't stop me." And it can lead to some very unpleasant interactions. And so that's also not an ideal approach. A much more ideal approach is in the middle, which is known as authoritative parenting. Authoritative parenting. So there's definitely an authority role and responsibility that the parent plays, but it's done so with warmth, with respect, and with clear communication. So, and that's one of the major differences between authoritarian parenting and authoritative parenting. Authoritarian parenting, there's no conversation. There's no communication. There's no discussion. It's because I said so. Whereas in authoritative parenting, the bottom line is what the parent said. But the parent does try to help the child understand why. Why is it that you shouldn't do this? Why is it that you're not allowed to go and do X, Y, Z? We're going to talk about some examples going forward as to where parents can sometimes run into challenges. And we'll talk a little bit about why we might be hesitant to explain to our children the rationale, the reasoning behind our judgment. She notes one parent saying that "my children have many friends, but they only have one father." My children, they have many friends. They don't necessarily need another friend, but they only have one father. And if I will not be that father to them, no one will be that father to them. Same thing with mother. If I will not be the mother to them, no one will be the mother to them. All right? So we have a role. Allah has assigned us a role, and we must play that role. Now, that also involves consistent rules and predictable consequences. One of the things that really throws children off is unpredictability. Unpredictability. Because again, unpredictability reflects lack of structure. Think about the child who grows up in a home not knowing what the response will be to a said action. Sometimes they do something and the parent looks at them and just ignores, okay, whatever. And sometimes they do the same thing and the parent explodes, completely loses it. This is confusing to a child because the child's trying to understand what's acceptable, what's not. Small request, guys. If you can just move up, inshallah. On this side too, if you can just move up. There's plenty of space here. So as people come, that there's space for them to join, inshallah. Please come forward. And so parents were consistent. They were consistent in their rules. They were consistent in the consequences to actions. They did not, this is a very important one. Parents did not discipline based on how they felt. This is key. Parents did not discipline based on how they felt. Now think about this, because sometimes parents do this. They will discipline when it irritates them. And if they're in a good mood and it doesn't irritate them, they won't discipline. This creates unpredictability, lack of structure. What the child internalizes is that the standard of what is acceptable is whatever is in alignment with the mood of my father or my mother. The parent's mood becomes the standard by which behaviors are judged. And we don't want that. We don't want our children to base their behaviors purely on how we feel. No. It should be based on what's right or wrong. So whether I'm in a good mood or a bad mood, it doesn't matter. I must hold them to those standards that stand independent of me. And these parents would do that. What's the other kind of outcome when you do when you discipline from this angle? The other outcome is you do not discipline from rage. You do not discipline with humiliation. You discipline with composure. With composure. The child understands you're not just letting out your rage. You are actually highlighting what they did wrong. Does that make sense? And there's a big difference. Because what you'll notice, especially if you ever become upset with a child, is when they start to feel your anger, they totally miss the message. Whatever you're telling them, they miss it. Because they're so stricken by fear that they're just trying to how can I make him or her happy? That's all they're thinking. And so when our anger and rage begins to seep through our discipline, the child senses it. Whereas when we discipline with composure, right? We take a moment, we compose ourselves, we say, look, you did this wrong, you messed this up, and you know that we told you last time this is not acceptable, and if you did so, here's the consequence, so here's the consequence. And the child will give you the big puppy eyes. No, I'm sorry, I messed up, I won't do it again. And the child and the parent faces a very critical moment there because they could cave in. It's very easy to cave in that moment. Your child's looking at you and they just, these real eyes of guilt. Should you give in? Should you be like, okay, fine, don't do it again? Should you do that? I mean, you love your child, right? What message is sent if you give in? There's two primary messages sent here. One, yeah. Right. That the next time I'm stuck in the same predicament, The way out is to kind of, right, to behave again and appeal to their pity, to their guilt. What's the other message that you're sending? Back to what we mentioned earlier. That decisions and consequences are decided based on how I feel. So right now I'm feeling an overwhelming sense of pity, so I'll let you go. But if it's wrong, it's wrong. And if this consequence agreed upon is this, then you must deliver the consequence. As much as your heart doesn't want to. And you know when your heart doesn't want to, you're actually going to deliver it with no rage. Because you don't want to even punish. Your heart feels bad for them. But you know that they need to adhere and, conduct themselves in accordance to this standard. So you must hold them to it. You must hold them to it. This is very challenging. This is very challenging when we are driven very strongly by our empathy and by our love. But remember, love must be balanced between justice and mercy. There's a time for mercy, but there's a time for justice. And balancing between the two. Balancing. It's very important. It's very difficult. It's very difficult. One way that you could express this is these parents corrected wrongdoings. These parents corrected wrongdoings without losing their own akhlaq. Without losing their own akhlaq. And there's a very big difference between someone who does, lose their akhlaq and someone who's able to maintain their akhlaq. And so, this is a lot. We can go back and talk again about ourselves as parents and who we are, because it's connected to that. Sometimes we discipline, we try to correct, we try to address an issue, not so much in relation to the child, but due to an internal reaction of our own. Something that we feel guilty about. Right? We feel guilty about. And some flaw that we have. And we allow that then to impact how we discipline. This is where it's very important for us to work on ourselves and be aware of our own flaws, our own shortcomings, our own points of guilt. We ever seen parents who overcompensate? So their rage seeps through and they discipline, then they feel guilty and they start to ignore certain mistakes. It's like a cycle, right? They are out of control in anger, they discipline really hard. The child is like taken aback, like, whoa. The parent realizes later on, I shouldn't have done that, I was way too hard. So then they try to balance it by going the other extreme. The next time the child messes up something pretty big, the parent's like, it's okay, it's okay. Why? Why are they saying that? Because they feel guilty about the other extreme. And this is like a pendulum, right? It's like a teeter-totter. Oops, it's been a while, right? It's just like a teeter-totter. He's going back and forth. And this is not healthy for the child. And this is where we have to dig deep into ourselves to understand, why is it that I'm reacting the way I'm reacting? Why do certain things cause me to react more strongly than others? There's a reason. When they mess this up, I get really upset. When they mess that up, I'm not as upset. What does that say about me and what's important to me? One of the most common things you might hear is, for example, how upset do we become when our children commit a spiritual error, a religious error? They do something wrong religiously. Islamically, it's wrong. They break a commandment of Allah. How upset do we become? They miss a prayer. They lie. They steal. They don't recite their Quran. They don't perform well in their Quran studies. And then how upset are we when they get a really bad mark on their test? How upset are we when they don't get into the university we want them to get into? And what does that say number one, what does that say about our values? Number one, what message does that send to the child about what's important in life? Especially when the child just wants the approval of the parent. Right? And this is something, subhanAllah, like, as I've reflected on this throughout my life, I realized my parents placed so much emphasis on Islamic studies. So much. Arguably, maybe more than, school. If not equal, though. My parents were very particular about this. So whenever there were like exams in the masjid and stuff, my parents were very on my case. How are you doing? Are you studying? Are you reviewing? Which surahs? They were on my case. And then which position did you get? And they'd be upset why'd you make mistakes? Right? And for school too. For school, they were also on my case, right? But I would see other students not like that. And I know, low key, I was jealous of them, It's like, man, your parents don't even say anything to you. You can get last place in Quran studies and you get away with it. I wish I could be you. But today I'm grateful. Wallahi al-azim. My parents, I'm grateful for the discipline, the strictness that they had when it came to Quranic studies. Right? I still kind of wish like they weren't so harsh about the math, You get like 85 and they're like, 85? Right? What is this? How hard is math, they would say. And then if you got really good in like gym, they were like, so what, right? I'm like, it's a good mark. Like, give me some credit here. So, yeah, right. Alhamdulillah. And so these parents did not, back to the article, she writes that these parents did not see the limits and the boundaries as evidence of mistrust, but rather as a proof of how much they cared. And so they would explain the rules to their children, to really convince and explain to their child, it's not that I don't trust you. That's not why I'm setting these boundaries. It's that I care about you and I know the dangers that are out there, so I'm going to protect you from them. That's my role. The Prophet ﷺ said, every one of you is a shepherd. أَلَا كُلُّكُمْ رَاعٍ وَكُلُّكُمْ مَسْئُولٌ عَنْ رَعِيَّتِهِ. And every one of you will be asked about their flock. If you think about a shepherd's role is twofold. A shepherd must be able to guide their flock to grass that's beneficial for the flock. But then the shepherd must also be aware of the threats, the wolves, so that the shepherd can protect the flock from the wolves and from the threats. So as a parent, sometimes our role is to protect our children from threats that they don't understand. Just like young children, right? You take scissors away from them. You take like a knife away from them, and they get upset. I wanted to play with that. It's so shiny. And you're like, no, it's harmful, right? But they don't understand that. We do. And even if they cry, no, inshallah, like reasonable parent would be like, chalo, here, take it back, right? No parent's going to do that. Because we understand it's harmful, no matter how much they cry. Right? So, same thing when it comes to other things that we know very well are very harmful. As parents, like, in our times, maybe we can dedicate a whole session to this at some point. But it's like day by day, I'm seeing more and more come out about the harms, right? The research that's now, because obviously we have to experiment to see the ultimate impact, but smartphones, right? Now you're seeing countries put policies in place, laws in place, banning the use of social media under a certain age. There's a reason for this. And it's like we're waking up to it now. The fact that countries are now putting laws in place tells us that, it's reached the policymakers. The research is that kind of clear. And so it's not, your child is going to feel a little left out. Naturally, they're going to feel left out. Half their class has smartphones. Half their class is on Snapchat. And you're going to be that parent saying no. You're going to hold out. You're going to be the bad guy. But you have to explain to them, right? You have to explain to them that it's not from a lack of trust. It's because you care and you have a duty to protect them. Let's talk about a very specific example here. It'll come up in the next one, to be honest, so we could talk about it there. But yeah, the last point I'll mention here on this about being the bad guy and not behaving badly, it's, as parents, there needs to be a public front of unity. What does that mean? When the parents stand before the child to explain something, there must be a united front. This is the final decision for how this child will navigate the world. What we're going to allow them to do, what we're not going to allow them to do. If the parents disagree, those disagreements should happen in private. What is very harmful for the child to witness is in front of them, the parent, the father or the mother is telling the other one, the one says, you know what, from now on, XYZ rule. And the other parent's like, no. That's very harsh. That's very harsh. Right? That's very hard. We shouldn't do that. And the other one's like, no, that's what it is. And it turns, no, it's okay. I know he said that or she said that. They're very upset, but it's okay, you can do this. And if this happens repeatedly, what does the child understand? If I need a yes, I know which parent to go to. And you begin to undermine authority. So the one parent says, no more of this. The child's like, okay. Walks away, goes to the other parent that they know is the yes parent, the good cop, right? And says, hey, can I do this? And they're like, yeah, sure. They walk away. And the next time they do it, the first parent says, I told you not to do it. Yeah, but I asked the other one, and they said it's okay. And then they turn to the other parent and go, why did you say yes? I said no. And they start to argue. This is not healthy for the child. The parents that she interviewed, she says, they were very consistent amongst each other on presenting a united front. So they didn't make up rules in the moment. They would sit together and say, this issue's coming up. Our child is going to want to do this. They recently asked me about this. What should we do? And they can disagree. They can go back and forth in private. Absolutely. When the time comes, they say, look, here's what we're going to tell the child. And we agree, right? Okay. They exit the room. They go in front of the child. Here's the rule. The child has clear guidance with no loopholes, with no good cop, bad cop, no room for manipulation. Not that the child is malevolent, but that the child will look for the path of least resistance. The child will do that because they just want to have fun. Okay. The next tip that she mentions that the parents would give is that the parents said, I always kept them close by. I always kept them close by. Now, this is interesting because some of us, when we hear this, we go, wait, that sounds a lot like helicopter parenting. It sounds a lot like you're controlling them. No. The child understood and felt that the parent wanted to be around them. That the parents enjoyed being with them. It wasn't control, it was connection. And think about that. Think about a parent who comes and says, oh, my son, oh, my daughter, I want to be with you. And I don't want to be with you in the sense of I want to sit here and criticize you and tell you what to do and lecture you. And no, I just want to hang out with you. I'll take an interest in what you take an interest in it. And as you get older and life begins to weigh on you, it's very hard because you feel like you're wasting your time. Right? You feel like you're wasting your time. You're like, why are we talking about this? This is such a ridiculous conversation. Children will ask the most insane, sometimes, questions of topics. You're like, wow, what are we talking about? But that's interesting to them. And we in taking an interest in what they take an interest in, we are able to establish a connection. And so, when you look at the Prophet ﷺ, right, we see that he himself modeled this. He was preparing his companions who would go on to change the world. He was, shouldering the responsibility of inviting all of humanity to his message, the message from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But at the same time, he took out time to carry his grandchildren on his shoulders. That when he was praying, if he heard a child crying in the back, he would shorten the prayer. Right? He would still complete the prayer, but he would make it, not as long, so as to not, cause any distress to the mother who was praying behind him. That when he was in sujood, his grandchildren would climb on his back. What do we understand from all of this? When his daughter Fatima radiallahu anha would enter the room, he would stand up for her. The narrations mention that when she walked, it resembled the walking of the Prophet ﷺ. That there was a bond. A deep, deep bond. Despite all the responsibilities he had a deep bond with his daughter Fatima. Deep bond. To the point that one of the last people he shared, a secret, essentially, message with was Fatima. Towards the end of his life, when he told her that he will be leaving soon, and she cried, and then he said, "And you will be the first to meet me thereafter," and she laughed. And yes, shortly after the passing of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, she passed away. There was a deep connection they had, despite everything. And so, one of the things, now this is people get really worked up about this topic, but we need to be very real about it, because at the end of the day, there are some very serious consequences. The first 7 years are extremely critical in the life of a child. The first 7. These are the years when the bond of attachment is especially built with the child. لَعِبْهُمْ سَبْعًا. Play with them for 7 years, right? Build that strong connection with your child for those first 7 years. What she notes about the parents she interviewed, Hina Khan Mukhtar, she notes that most of them rather, they avoided daycares. And it was not because they were being judgmental towards working parents or anything like that, or it was merely that in these formative years, the children should primarily absorb values, language, and behavior from those who love them the most and from those whose values align with the values of the parents. And so what she observed amongst these parents is that when the time came, sometimes one parent would stay home temporarily to look after the child, or one parent would work part-time so that they could give a lot of time to the child. Sometimes a trusted relative, like a grandparent, if they're healthy enough, would provide care while the parents worked. Sometimes they had a nanny that they knew that the values of the nanny aligned with their family values, and who respected and understood their values. And so she tells a story in one of her lectures about a single mother that she met. And she worked long hours. She had put her toddler in daycare. And over time, she started to notice that her son imitated the daycare worker's tone and habits more than hers. And so she realized, this mother realized that, wow, someone else is shaping the soul of my child. Now, instead of saying, well, it is what it is, she made a bold decision, right? She withdrew him, she took him out of daycare, and she opened her own daycare at home, in which she had her own child, and she was able to recruit other children. And so in that way, she was focused on giving her child her time, but also able to earn money by, serving as a babysitter to other children. Of course, that's not the solution for everybody. But what she's trying to highlight is when this becomes a priority, you realize that you have this once in a lifetime opportunity with this child to give them the love and formation that they need, that, you become open to making more sacrifice. And so here's another issue of like keeping them close by. And it's one that comes up often. It's sleepovers. What's the policy around sleepovers? She says this was one of the most debated topics. But she says she noticed, despite slightly different approaches, almost all of them, where all parents attempted to balance between two things: preserve the safety of the child, but also don't isolate them from the world. So, for example, some parents, she said, just no sleepovers. No, this is not an option. It's funny because you'll see the approach of, you're not allowed to sleep at their house, but they can sleep at ours. And it's funny because if you universalize that ethic, nobody sleeps at anybody's house, right? But it's a very interesting ethic. Anyways, no sleepovers at all. This was one approach some parents took. They explained that, look, there are great risks, and this is well documented. If you've spoken to young adults today who will tell you about the first time that they heard a certain word, or they heard a topic, that they saw a certain image, right? And God forbid, certain behaviors, it was over at sleepovers, right? Sleepovers. And so one approach is just no sleepovers at all. Another approach is cousin-only sleepovers. So now, when you know the parents because you're related to them, you know the children because they're family, some parents would say, we're okay with that. Some parents would do half sleepovers, meaning what? We'll drop off the children in the evening. They'll stay till like 11:30, 12, but then we bring them home. Ultimately, they will sleep at home no matter what. And then there were some situations where it was conditional, right? So it was on the condition that, for example, the daughters would be at the home only when there are no males there, right? No adult males, because all the males are traveling. They're out on a trip or something. So on certain conditions. These were the different approaches she noted amongst parents to this topic of sleepovers. But the message was very clear. We're not trying to control you, oh my child, but you must also understand that the world is not always a safe place. And I think we hesitate here, right? We hesitate. Why might we hesitate? Anyone? We hesitate in explaining. We're comfortable maybe setting the boundary. Say, no sleepovers at all. And our children say, why not? It's just the way it is. Why do we hesitate? Because we have a reason. Why do we hesitate from the reason? Yeah. As a parent, but why do we hesitate in sharing the reasoning behind why we're stopping them from going to a sleepover? Yeah. Absolutely. I think a lot of us, we have this thing of we don't want our children to lose trust in humans. So it's almost like we want to shelter them from any evil in the world. We won't even tell them about it. Now, I'm not saying you have to spell out all the worst case scenarios. But I do think it's often helpful to give them some understanding that human beings may not always be, in adults included, may not always be trustworthy. They may not always treat you with kindness and with respect. And sometimes when we're worried about that, we need to draw a boundary. As a parent, we tell them. And they can kind of be confused, like, really? Because sometimes they're naive. They think everyone's nice and adults are all good and, want good for them. You say, no, that's not the case. To be clear about that. And at some point you have to be. At some point you have to be. There's no sheltering them further. Right? We talk about stranger danger, right? The classic. I mean, I've never heard a story in recent times of like someone offering candy from the window. Right? It's a classic one. If someone offers you candy, don't answer it, right? It's like kids don't walk home anymore. Anyways, right? So ain't nobody get a chance to like offer candy. But subhanallah. You also get to the point of college years, when they get to college university. Do you just let them go live on campus? She mentions how an imam that was interviewed strongly advised parents keep their children close to home for at least the first 2 years of college. Even if they received acceptance letters from prestigious out-of-town universities. And it's developmental and spiritual in nature, this advice. Because at 18, many young adults are intellectually capable, but emotionally vulnerable. This is a reality. They're intellectually smart, like they got into this good university. Emotionally, they're vulnerable. And you put them on a campus, surrounded by what? Other people that do not come from the same value system as you. There's a lot of groupthink going on, a lot of peer pressure influencing. It's not, anyone who knows, who's lived on campus or been around campus knows it's not always, or it often is not a very healthy environment. And so, there's different approaches to this. That's one imam's advice. The idea is you don't just blanket statement. This is probably the key message to take away. Is there should not be blanket rules where at 18 they can do this. No, at 18C, can they handle that? Emotionally, are they in a position to? Have we prepared them for that? And accordingly then make judgments. So what we want is for our children to feel our presence and to feel that we are accessible and available to them, but not to feel that we're trying to control them all the time. And so, checking in with them. She quotes a mother as saying, do you know the spelling of the word love for children? It's 4 letters. Time. Right? Children interpret time as love. How much time are we willing to give our children? And again, not time of interrogation. So I spend 15 minutes with them going, what? Did you do this? Did you do that? Did you finish this? You finished that? And I'm like, yeah, I spoke to them for 15 minutes today. No, you interrogated them for 15 minutes. They didn't enjoy a single moment of it. But sitting there and just talking about the stuff they want to talk about, it's different. It's difficult. Because here's a question, and we'll finish with this. If you look back to the moments that you had with your parents, the fond moments, what were they? They're often rituals, things you used to do together. They're often just daily habits you had. You know what I mean? Just small things you did together often. Anyone remember any of that? I remember hearing about one father, the daughters said that our favorite time growing up was the Sunday morning breakfast. We would go out with our father and have breakfast together. And we did this every Sunday. Is it a grand gesture? No. But it's time taken out of the schedule, devoted and dedicated to these children. Anyone have anything you want to share? Some ritual, something with the mother, father that they remember and look back on and really kind of cherish that experience. Not a grandiose one. Not like they took me for Umrah or so. That's beautiful too. But that's often not every year. It's often once in a while. But like something that you would do more on a weekly basis, maybe even daily. Anyone want to share something? Yeah. Beautiful. When you get in the car and you read a Fatiha and then you go. Beautiful. Right. What else? Interesting, right? At the time, he probably just thought he was doing like a spiritual act. But in hindsight, it's like a moment of connection, of bonding with everybody. Beautiful.